Good morning. Hope we're doing okay. Hope we're keeping safe. Hope we're keeping sane. Yes, I'm standing up today. How very novel. Firstly, before I get into the subject of today's video, I want to talk about me. I want to talk about where I've been and what I've been doing. Today is now Thursday. On Tuesday, I had my first vaccination. I had the Moderna vaccine. And Tuesday, I felt absolutely fine, if a little tired. Wednesday, I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt a bit kind of fluey, a bit feverish, headaches, the whole rest of it, and I was pretty much wiped out for the whole of Wednesday. Today is now Thursday, and thankfully, I'm feeling an awful lot better. Now, the reason I mention this is not because I want to put people off having the vaccine. I'm not anti-vax. I also don't want to promote the vaccine. I'm not pro-vax either. All right, let's just get this right. I'm very much neutral in this debate. But I just sort of want to let you know that if you have got this vaccine planned, if you are scheduled to have this vaccine, and you do get these side effects, they do seem to pass fairly quickly. So yeah, hopefully you don't suffer too much with the ill effects. Today I want to talk about fault and responsibility, and I want to talk about why we gamble and how our psychological underpinnings of our recovery can affect the chances of success when it comes to quitting gambling. Now, what I'm not saying from the title of this video and from this opening gambit is that you should necessarily quit gambling. That is, of course, a personal choice, and there is a substantial number of people who enjoy gambling in a kind of responsible, controlled and recreational way. And so anything I'm saying isn't to say you have to stop gambling now, because if you're watching this and you don't believe that gambling is causing you any problems, and actually it's not causing you any problems, then of course crack on, live your life, do what you want to do. Not my responsibility to tell you otherwise, but really this is focused on those people who want to stop gambling or have accepted that gambling is causing a significant problem in their lives and want to address it in a way that helps them get into a constant and consistent and sustained recovery. Right, so if I want to start off looking at the reasons why we gamble. Now, there are a lot of superficial reasons why we gamble, aren't there? Maybe we see a new casino advertised on TV, maybe you get an email for a particularly sort of tempting either sign-up offer or redeposit offer or something like that for an online casino. Maybe we walk past the bookies in the town and we think, oh, we'll just pop in and have a go. There's an abundance, a plethora of gambling promotion in so many different formats, both online, in the mainstream media, on social media, on the TV, on the radio, everywhere you go, gambling is being pushed at us. And if you have any kind of propensity to gamble, be that in a harmful or in a recreational sense, there is a lot of potential triggers out there that will cause us to gamble. Looking on the slightly darker side of it for us, people who have a problem with gambling or a gambling addiction, then our compulsion to gamble may be less of a conscious decision and more of a compulsion that pushes us towards gambling. However, it is still a decision that we make as an activity to undertake. So, for example, we may have had a particularly stressful day at work. We might have had an argument with the wife. Any number of problems in our lives might lead us to undertake our addiction, to reach out to this addiction in terms of a resolution to our problems, or at least an element of escapism from our problems. If we wind this back and we look at why we started gambling in the first place, and this is really the heavyweight bit of this. Now, I will tell you my story, as I have done before on this channel. I started gambling to an extent that was harmful for me and that I believe underpinned my addiction going into my adult life when I was at secondary school. When I was at secondary school, I was quite badly bullied, and I found some solace, some escapism in both a physical and a psychological sense in places where I could play fruit machines and gamble. And so I did that as a means of escaping from effectively what was causing the misery in my life. And that was then carried through into my adult life and became the basis of my addiction. And I think a lot of people will have similar stories, and not just for gambling addiction. People with addictions of all sorts will generally find the underpinnings of that addiction are based in a traumatic experience or a traumatic period of their life when they were younger. Quite often it stems from an abusive childhood, a very difficult time at school, a period of grief following the death of someone close to them, and addiction serves as a form of escapism, and as it serves as a consistent in their lives that they can turn to in order to subdue their grief or to subdue their pain. which is quite a heavyweight way of looking at things. But I think a lot of people, certainly anecdotally, will find that their addiction stems from being surrounded by others with the same addiction. Certainly, it's not uncommon for people who grow up in a household with alcoholic parents to become reliant on alcohol by means as a way to solve their problems, because that's what they've grown up to subconsciously, a subconscious way of dealing with their emotions and with their problems in their lives. So there's a huge amount of reasons why we gamble. There's a huge amount of factors that we can blame for our addiction, and there are certainly, no shortage of ways in which we can look at minimising these risks to, the future generations, to other people, and to those who are potentially at danger of gambling or potential of developing gambling addictions. But I want to separate this out from responsibility. I want to compartmentalise them. There is nothing wrong, and in fact, I actively encourage people to talk about, discuss, campaign for, promote changes that will help protect potentially vulnerable people. Be that changes in legislation, be that limits on gambling advertising, being that making sure there's not bloody 12 bookies on every high street. I fully support a lot of these causes, and I think it's very, very important that we continue to talk about ways in which we can minimise risk to gamblers. However, that is fault, and I want to talk about responsibility. And when it comes to responsibility for our gambling, there is literally one person and one person alone who is responsible for our gambling, and that is us. Now, before I get shot down in flames, which invariably I will, because people will say, "Oh, Phil? What about the streamers? What about the adverts on TV? This is forcing us to gamble." It's not forcing us to gamble. Yes, it might be a trigger for us to gamble, and I think a lot of this stuff, is potentially harmful. And I think there is always room for discussion around increased legislation, increased restrictions, and increased protection for vulnerable people. But I am talking about the real underpinnings. I'm talking the real fundamentals of responsibility. This isn't a case of we are solely to blame for our addiction. It's not about blame. Okay, if I wanted to blame people, I could blame the bullies at school who drove me to gamble. I could blame all the brand new casinos that opened up and promoted to me knowing that I was banned from other casinos. I could blame the dodgy ways in which the bookies got round the rules on fob tees to enable us to continue to gamble high stakes even though they were supposedly limited. I could gamble various elements of legislation. I could blame all the people bombarding me with text messages offering me sign-up deals. There is so many places I could blame, and I'm not saying that these aren't at fault. And this is definitely a discussion to be had, but it needs to be compartmentalised from responsibility, because when it comes to responsibility for our gambling and responsibility for our addiction, there can only be one person that is responsible, and that is us. And sometimes that is grossly unfair. That is grossly unfair. And if we take a real extreme hypothetical example, someone is living in an abusive relationship or an abusive household or an abusive scenario, and they are almost effectively being forced to take recreational, harmful, highly addictive drugs day in, day out. They will develop a severe dependency on this harmful, addictive, illegal drug. They will develop a severe addiction to this drug. We could say without any doubt that it is not their fault they have this addiction. It is not their fault they have become reliant and physically dependent upon this drug. They have been forced into this addiction. And that's a much, much more extreme example, like I say, of the bullying and all the rest of the triggers that I had as a younger person that sent me to the arcades, to send me starting my gambling career, as it were. But even in that extreme example, it is their responsibility. It is the addict's responsibility solely to address their addiction. Is that fair? No. No, it's absolutely not fair. And I'm not saying that they're at fault in any way, shape or form. I'm saying that it is, unfortunately, regardless of the situation you find yourself in, it can only ever be your responsibility to deal with it. Because if you don't, no one else is going to do it for you. And this was a strange shift in mentality I had, and thus far has helped, I believe, in my current long stint of gambling recovery. Now, it's very hard to sort of explain this because I say a lot of people I know will go, well, you know, are you saying it's solely the addict's fault? No, I'm not saying it's solely the addict's fault. I'm really not. Like I say, there's loads of people, or you know, rulings or legislation, or even the venues that would allow me to gamble as an underage person. I could pin a lot of the fault for my addiction on. But if I want to recover, if I want to get better, then I have to take responsibility, because it is solely my responsibility to fix this. And once you grasp responsibility, however unfair it is, however unfair the situation you find yourself in is, it's only by taking responsibility for ourselves and for our gambling that we can actually actively make a start on our recovery and build a better life for ourselves. Is it the fault of a child of alcoholic parents that they have a problem with alcohol? No, it's not. It's very much the fault of the parents. But it's the responsibility of that child going into adulthood to address their problem, because nobody else is going to do it for them. Is that fair? Of course it's not fair. It's really unfair that people find themselves in situations where addiction comes out of, you know, basically a shitty set of circumstances or the actions of other shitty people around them. It's grossly unfair. But if we can take responsibility for ourselves, if we can, you know, grasp that, however unfair, however bitter pill it is to swallow this responsibility, because we don't feel we deserve it. No, we might not deserve it, but we've got it. And we need to grasp it, and we need to do what we need to do in order to address it. Because if we go through our lives looking backwards and looking at, you know, what caused our addiction, or in the shorter term, what causes us to perpetuate our addiction, what triggers us to partake in whatever harmful activity, you know, we're partaking in, then we will forever be looking back and not living in the day, and not living our recovery, and not living for a better future. So yes, you know, so many people, particularly addicts, you know, don't get. It's not a case of, oh, I tried I smoked a bit of weed and now I'm a heroin addict. It doesn't work like that, despite probably what they taught you at school. Most addiction comes off the back of a traumatic experience or a traumatic period in our lives. And yes, it sucks, and yes, it's unfair. But we can worry about that at a later date. We can, you know, there's great therapists and stuff that, you know, people can go to help unpick the problems of their past. And I myself have seen one, so this isn't, like I say, any kind of judgment on anyone. But if we want to make an active start in our recoveries, if we want to start making a better life for ourselves, then we need to take responsibility, and we need to do something about it. We need to do something today. If we haven't done already, we need to take active steps, which I've talked about before, I'm not going to go over again now, in order to kickstart this recovery and make a better lives for ourselves, because that's the only way that we are going to be able to look retrospectively and go, no, fuck you. I did this. I'm a better person for this now. And yeah, I'll end by saying this doesn't mean we shouldn't care about the other elements. It doesn't mean we shouldn't care about gambling legislation. It doesn't mean we shouldn't care about the fact there's 10 bookies on every fucking high street, right? I get it. These are things that should be addressed. Gambling promotion, the fact I'm inundated every day with text messages and emails promoting gambling sites to me, even though I'm on GamStop and self-excluded from everywhere, right? That is predatory and it's wrong and it needs to be sorted out. But from addiction perspective, we need to compartmentalise that. Deal with us first. Deal with our, you know, take responsibility for our addiction and do something about that now. And then we can look and help other people in the future by addressing these other societal problems and problems with the industry as a whole. But we need to separate this one out and deal with this and get this in order. And that can only, as unfair as it might be sometimes, that can only ever be our responsibility. Thanks for watching. I don't know if you enjoyed the fact I was standing up for this video. I just thought it might be a bit different. Doesn't mean I need to lean over to say goodbye to you. So stay safe, stay sane, have a good day, look after yourselves for God's sake, and I'll speak to you soon. All the best.